and their battle and beefs time.
All of those beefs, 50 and Nas, M and the Source.
And you're in the midst of all
You're in the
this.
midst.
Yeah. I was a casualty of war in that beef.
Yeah.
Eminem and Benzino
Right.
thing. I was a casualty of war. They were just dragging my name through the mud like they could do that. Yeah.
And then, like, how would you deal with that, though?
Yeah.
Like, keep going, put your head up high, and just keep going. Like,
Yeah, like having tough skin, right? Like when Marshall, I don't know him like that, just funny. When he put my name in a record, and people to this day, like, they'll mention it. If you know, right? And they'll like mention, we'll joke around about it. I'm like, that boy don't know me. But that was such a big deal at the time. It was like, Eminem dissed you. I'm like, first of all, you shouldn't be dissing a girl. Okay. But it was a big deal at the time. It was the biggest rapper out. And it was disrespectful, but it wasn't very clever.
A mama first, journalist, author, TV producer, boss woman. Listen, it is a pleasure and honor to be sitting right next to you. Kim Osorio.
Thank you.
I like to say your full name. You know, I was saying your last name wrong for a long time. I'd be like Osorio. And I watched all your interviews and I see how you pronounce it. And I'm like, it's Osorio.
I think it is.
Yes.
But people ask me, I'm like, I don't know. Osorio is what I say. Kim Osorio.
Right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that's how my father says it, right? And he would know.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Now, your father, being that you guys grew up in the Bronx.
Yes.
That's, you know, for you, I know you've talked about it in a very extensive manner of just how much that played a part and has shaped you to be the woman that you are today.
Yeah.
The Bronx is obviously a very special place. It is the home place, birth of hip hop.
Yes, it is. Bronx. Woohoo.
So we're celebrating hip hop. Obviously, it's been 50 years.
50
and
years.
For another 50, 100 gazillion years more to go. But you were there.
I was.
In the early stages. How was it then when you were just growing up in the Bronx, just regular life, going to school, and seeing hip hop grow to where it is today?
I mean, it's incredible. So the hip hop birthday, right, is August 11th, 1973, right? We're celebrating 50 years of hip hop. So I did some calculations.
Okay.
And I've decided, and it adds up,
Okay.
that I was conceived on that day. I decided that.
Okay.
So I have no proof of this.
Yeah.
But if you go back to that 40-week period of pregnancy from my birthday, you will go back to around that date.
Close enough.
Close enough for me to claim it.
Absolutely.
And since we are in the stage of everyone's just creating their own narrative and putting it out on social media, doesn't matter if it's true.
Yeah.
I decided that that's what it was for me.
I like
so
it.
I was conceived on the birthday of hip hop.
you're hip hop's baby.
Yes, I am.
Oh, this is so cute.
I know. See, it works.
I love
now watch
this.
it spread.
Yeah, I know.
All we got to
Spread
do
it.
is add like some drama and scandal.
Yeah, like, oh my gosh, you won't believe, ooh, and do facial expressions,
Right.
and then they'll post it on social media, then you'll get the clicks.
Right. Like I just need to say like, cool, her might be my father or something.
Boom.
But
It's spreading.
but now it's going to go crazy.
But that's got to be.
No, but he's not my dad.
Yeah, but it's got to be a beautiful thing for you to have
Mm-hmm.
experienced it and really just see the impact that
Yes.
it's had, not just obviously in New York, but not just the country, but the world.
It is pretty incredible because I can remember what it was like coming up back then in the Bronx, discovering the music, just being a part of the culture. And I think it was a very special time, and it really shaped how I view things. Like hip hop shaped my perspective on life because I was really raised in the culture.
Did you feel or know that you would play such an important role in hip hop when you were young?
No. I was just having
fan.
fun.
Right.
And remember, hip hop wasn't this big business that it is today. So I kind of was just following the music, living my life, growing up in the culture, but thinking, what am I going to be one day? Right? And trying to figure out what my career was. I didn't think that would intersect.
Ever?
Probably not until I was out of law school.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, I always looked at it as a hobby, right? Like writing, coming up in the game, wanting to, DJ. I had turntables, wanting to write about music. Like it was a side thing. It was, I was going to college. I had a fine arts degree. I was studying art history. I then graduated, went to law school. I got my JD. Like I was like, okay, well, I've got to get my life together.
Right.
I have to work. What am I going to do? And success for me and my family coming out of where we came from was like, well, they didn't know about creative careers, right? It was like you'd be a lawyer or a doctor and that's a success. So I went to law school. And I love studying law and everything that I did to get my degree. Like I was interested in it, but that was success to me, right? I had to figure something out. After college, I didn't really know what I was going to do, even though I was already writing and I was already in the culture and I was building my career. I didn't think I was be sitting here in 2023 still eating off of that.
It's crazy.
No, I think every day, like maybe you need to take the bar.
So you didn't take the bar?
I took it. I failed.
Oh.
Yeah, I took it a few times, but I took it right out of law school and I didn't study because I was having way too much fun in the club. Like, I'm just going to be honest. When I graduated law school, it was 1999. That was a good year. If you were around in 99, then you know about all the clubs and the parties.
Yeah.
And I was there.
Not studying for the bar. That's
Not
exactly
studying for the
what
bar.
happened.
And then I failed. And then the job at the source came. So once I got that job at the source, it was kind of like these two paths, and I went that way. And I haven't looked back until probably yesterday. I was like, maybe you need to take the bar.
Maybe you need to go back and take the bar. But for a lot of people who obviously know you from being the editor-in-chief of The Source, they don't realize that was, 10 years of you already working in the industry. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't just this overnight success. Like, look at me, I'm here. It was
grinding.
It was a lot of work. You moved around in the industry.
Yep.
What was the main entry point? Was it you working at a distribution company? What was it? Or was it the record labels? Where was that main entry point and you knew I'm never looking back again?
Well, it took me a long time to get to the source, right? As we were describing, as I'm writing about the culture, I'm getting my interviews. I had a lot of access because I was outside.
Right.
So I was outside. Like I'm going to the club. Like, so when you meet people and we're all kind of coming up together, you are able to connect. And once you make those connections and you figure out how to use them in your job, right? Like I had the connections that a lot of people didn't have. So I would pitch stories, but I could get the interviews with certain people, right? I could get quotes. I could do a lot more research. I knew because I was just so embedded in New York at that time that I had a lot of information as I do today. Like the amount of information that I get from people, and I don't even do this anymore.
Right.
I'm fully in television.
Right.
But the amount of access and information that I have before it breaks, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And it's just something that I think is built based on your relationships. And back then I had that, and that kind of gave me a leg up when it came to writing about the culture, because it was like being in the know, know.
Do you feel like it gave you anxiety too? Because you know so much information and you know this information might be detrimental to somebody else, and you're just like, oh man, I kind of wish you didn't even tell me this situation.
No. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Like even to this day, when my phone rings and it's the reporter in me.
Right.
It's the media in me, right? Like I want to find out things, and the researcher. And I think that has a lot to do even with, being trained that way by going to law school, because I was digging. And even when a story breaks today, I end up having a different perspective on it, because I don't just read the story and pass it on. I read the story and then I go investigate on my own. And this isn't for work. This is just with my interests. I read the story and then I'm like, I'm gonna find out the real. And I dig for information. It's a thing that I just have in me. It's part of my interest. And unfortunately, a lot of people in media today don't have that.
Right. Research and accountability and
Nothing.
just
I can't believe the way people just like post things and then they run with it.
right.
I'm like, you didn't even check.
Right.
He did not get $10 million on that deal. I just checked.
Right.
But I see people running with those type of stories. So I'm like, oh. And so artists who are very savvy, right, they can control their narrative that way. And I watch it happen every day.
Who do you think has been really well at controlling their narrative?
Diddy, Kanye, the masters, DJ Khaled, Fat Joe. Like when you watch these people on social media, and they're good because they're great examples, they're authentic to their brand. So they're good examples, right? Jay-Z, right? Like they're giants in the culture. And I watch how they control their narrative. And it's impressive. And it's a business tactic.
Right. I mean, everything's a business, right?
Yeah. You know, I was trying to think of some women as examples that do a great job. And it's not to discredit the women in the game. I think it's harder for them to control their narrative.
Always going to be harder.
It's harder. The way that the media covers women and is, you know, very critical on women. It's just been a hard time, I think, especially for women in hip hop. So it's harder. But when they do it, I commend these women because I see how the stories play out.
Do you think there's a difference within genres as well when it comes to women and how, you know, I just feel like women have to work harder in general. It doesn't matter in what field, doesn't matter what it's going to be. But when it comes to music, do you feel that women in hip hop definitely have a bigger hill to climb versus women artists that are in the pop genre?
Right. Tough question because I would say, you know, like you said, that women across the board have it hard.
Yeah.
But it is a little crazy in hip hop sometimes.
It's harder.
It is harder.
Right.
It is. And once you become a mother and things change and your priorities change, it's very hard to stay on top of that grind, that hip hop media narrative grind. And we're in a culture where today the narrative is driving, not the music.
Ooh.
Right? So people are following the narrative first, and then maybe I'll check out your music, right? So if you're smart and savvy, you will push your narrative first.
Right.
And you know, and I see it, right? I look at the girls, just if you think about the young girls who are putting out music now, right? You haven't heard a lot of music, but look at Scarlett as an example. It's the narrative around her that everyone's following. Now you want to listen to her music, right? Because she's
I didn't pick
absolutely
that up. Right.
How many people really know anything besides the one song that she's put out, right? And she's done it a few times. But
And
people
great momentum, by the way.
Right. It's the narrative that people care about, right? So like now they're paying attention to her. That's what sparked everything with her, right?
Do you like that, or do you prefer music?
I love it, but I'm a music head. I follow it for a little while, and then I'm cool. You know what I'm saying, right? Like I feel like a lot of it's just like Ice Spice, the same thing. She's got good music,
right?
But I was fascinated with her when she first came out. Like people know, like people that I talk to on a daily basis, like they're like, there goes your girl, because when she came out, and I was actually working on a Rhapsody special. And I insisted that she get booked. Insisted. I was like, I want this girl. Because I was fascinated by her look, by the way she had blown up, right? Like, and this was way before she had Munch out, I think. And that was it. But it was her narrative that kind of caught me. And I was so invested in it. We booked her and we did an interview. But because she was still so new, we didn't really capitalize off of the moment, and it wasn't aired. But the whole team knows internally.
Right. Yeah,
they're like Kim
Kim
wanted Ice Spice.
Yeah.
I did, but that's a talent that I've had from going back. I can own it now. People knew me for that 20 years ago. I just saw Aaliyah Wilson We were talking at Elliot, as you guys know, was editor-in-chief at XXL when I was editor-in-chief at The Source, and we were talking at that Cardi B party the other night. Yeah. And he said to me, he was talking about the Kanye situation and how I had put him on the cover first, and I had got that first, and he said something about...
Meaning, hold on, you beat him to it.
I beat him to the cover.
Okay, it's okay. It's okay.
This was before
sure.
Kanye was Kanye.
Correct.
That's why we've had the relationship that we've had for so many years, because he remembers and he knows that this was before. So people didn't know. So I was like, no, this is something special, right? And I locked that cover in and I got it and I did the first cover on him, music, right? And Elliot brought up the other day. He was like, I was so mad. I told my whole staff to go home back then. And I laughed and I was like, but I knew it was going to happen.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I think just remembering that, like I haven't prided myself on that enough, right? When I think about music. But because a year ago or a year and a half, no, 2 years ago, whatever it was that we did the Ice Spice thing. 20 years later, when I'm not even at the Source or doing what I used to do, I'm like, oh yeah, you still got it. You can see it when it happens, right? So I feel like that, and that was something that gave me a leg up when I was at the Source, because I was always into music. Like I started doing what I did because of course I loved writing, but because I loved the music.
Outside of Kanye, who else did I see? Yeah,
champion,
you knew.
like,
Not only just see, but champion all the way through because you believed in them before they are who they are today.
It's so funny. Who else? I mean, there's a couple of great examples. I think though he's the biggest, so I always use that.
Of course, right.
Right. There was an NPR interview that was done about me and my case, right? One of the women that was interviewed talked about how when I had filed my case, there were a lot of people that didn't want to support just because they didn't like me, right? And I know it because I was there and I remember. But I don't like to really say that because it's like, hey, we're women, we stick together. I like to push that. But she said it in the interview. She was like, people didn't like him, so they didn't want to stick by her. And she said one of the reasons why they didn't like me, Rosa Clemente. She said one of the reasons, and I have a great relationship with her today, but she was like, was because they felt I was like flashy and I was like putting people on the cover that were like commercially successful and not being into like pure hip hop. First of all, I used to love the backpack stuff.
That's what you grew up on as well, part of your journey of loving hip hop, right? I've seen you talk about it.
You can get in my car and be like, are you really listening to Pharoah Monch right now? I'm like, yes. Like, people have done that. They've gotten in my car and be like, what are you listening to? And it's like some like real extra lyrical, like hardcore or whatever hip hop. So I'm always been like that. But when I was at the Source, I had to sell magazines.
Right.
So I knew I know good music, whether it was, extra lyrical, whether it was commercially like successful, shiny suits, whatever it was.
Right.
I just knew if it was good.
Right.
And that if it was going to resonate. So I think that was a talent. So it's a lot of people, to answer your question, that I think I saw, really before. I'm trying to think of good examples, but
if it comes to mind, tell us.
Yeah, I will.
And you know what I think people don't realize is that at the end of the day, it's a business, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people get mad at gatekeepers. There's always this conversation about gatekeepers.
Yeah, because that's what we were.
Right.
Gatekeepers.
So
yeah.
did you ever feel a way when people would come up to you and be like, oh, you're being a gatekeeper, you're not putting Pharoah Monch on the cover?
Right.
So
he was on the cover before I was the editor-in-chief, but...
Right, like during your reign when you're putting Murder, Inc. and you're putting everyone else on.
Right. When you especially are in that position and, when you're putting your cosign on something, right, people get nervous because it's like an A&R, right? Like you get nervous to sign something because what if, even though I know I love this and I really believe in it, my job's on the line. So what if this doesn't work?
Right. You can have 5 Kanyes and the one
yeah, like you start second guessing, right, what you believe in. And we're talking now, I'm 20 years removed from that time at the Source. I got to the Source at 2000. So I can look back now and be like, there were a lot of decisions that I made that maybe I would, that 100% I would make differently now in my career.
Like what?
Just I have more confidence in who I am now and my abilities to do what I do. I will walk out of a job in a heartbeat. Like, I don't like this right now. I'm done. I quit. It's maybe not the best thing, right? But back then, I was so nervous about, well, what's next? What are you gonna do? Like, you'll never get another job like this. This is the best one, like, you know. And so it was just looking at that. I know my value now, right? I turn down things now. People come to me like, hey, would you like to work on this? No, I wouldn't.
Right.
I don't have to. And I don't want to, because I don't want to just do something just because. I want to invest in, you know, the things that I want to do. I want to tell the stories I want to tell, the ones that I think are interesting, the ones that I feel like can be rewarding even to me as well. So I want to believe in a story, because I still tell stories. That's what I do. I just do it on TV.
Right.
But so I wanted to, and that doesn't mean like, you know, I'm turning down everything, right? Sometimes, you know, the offer looks good and you're like, well, okay. But I'm not just accepting things just to be down with this and with that. You know, it's a different feeling.
Yeah. Confidence and just knowing your self-worth.
And knowing your worth.
That's right.
And it's
for sure.
Especially for women in this business, I think it's
hard.
It's hard.
Right. And you question yourself, and there's always that doubt. But then now you're at a point where you're just like, no, I'm clear on what I want.
Yes.
Even if I make a mistake, I'm okay with the mistake.
Yeah, I'm good. And even if I pass up a check, sometimes I pass up things and it's like 6 months later, I'm like, I should have took that job.
Now, during that time, editor-in-chief, what was the landscape in music? Just so that people understand who's watching. And, you know, the real younger folks who are just like, okay, so before TikTok and Instagram, this really was it. This is the social media. You are running what people
magazine
would consider hip hop's Bible,
this
right?
Was an era.
This is an era, right? It shaped and it impacted culture.
Right.
What did the landscape look like?
I mean, we were the gatekeepers. Every era is different. I think we were in a very special era, right? Like, so, and even today, when I look at how much adoration is given to that time period, right? Even before my time. Because I got to the source technically at 2000, but I came up in the 90s. And the 90s is what everyone kind of looks back on and is like, ooh, the 90s. They always define golden era differently.
Right.
But the 90s was such a special time. I mean, this is when you look at, you know, just the hip hop billionaires of today, it was their coming of age. So the industry, in addition to the culture, was also being built like brick by brick, right? The culture and that first generation hip hop, which I still look up to. Someone asked me on an interview the other day, who's your top 5? I said, I'm going back to what my top 5 would have been in 1992. I was like, Big Daddy Kane, KRS-One, you know, because now so many eras have passed. It's a hard question to answer. I mean, people still ask that question, like, who's your top 5? I'm like, stop asking that. I'm like, there's too many people and there's too many different eras, and you got to look at the eras differently. And we took our job so seriously at the source when questions like that would be put out there.
Right.
When we would talk about these lists, right? I was big on lists. That was my thing. I used to do, you know, if you look at my issues, which are they still hold like that place of like the top selling issues of the source. So I woke up cocky today.
I love it.
I woke up super cocky today.
Please.
It was a long night. There's a lot going on. I woke up like...
Deservedly so.
Absolutely.
So when you look at that back then, you'll see a lot of the skylines on the magazines. It's like top 100 lyrics on my issues. Top 25 producers. I was going in with that back then because people... we're feeding off of it. And now, right? But we took so much care with that and time. We had criteria, and I remember we had lists, and if we were ranking lyricists, we didn't just put out a list at the source back then. It was like top 10 lyricists of whatever. We didn't just put out a list. You could go into our files and find criteria. It would be like flow, lyrics, storytelling, like down the page, and then everyone would be ranked, and then there'd be like a little column here where we would average out the numbers, and it was like a mathematical equation for us. and we could back it up and have like this sort of explanation as to why these are the best.
Right.
Nowadays, it's like everyone's like, they just throw the list up there just to get attention. But they don't really justify what they're saying. It's just like random lists.
Right.
Because people know how much they try, but there's no credibility to it.
But I think it goes back to the beginning of the conversation about you as a journalist, a writer, obviously coming from law.
Right.
Research is important, and being
Right.
able to cite the information and just
Right.
having credit involved, right? Like,
Yeah,
hey,
like we would
what-
have our papers
like-
on the desk, and
Yeah.
we would be like passing them around, like everybody vote
Right.
vote in each category, and it would be a meeting
Right.
there. I even did that recently, not recently, but maybe like 5 or 6 years ago when I was working on a special where I pulled all these journalists in a room. I was consulting. It was maybe a hip hop honors or something. I can't remember what the show was, but I was writing for the show, and I like pulled people in a room, and like we were having like this big debate, and then we were like citing things.
Right.
It was like justifying it. Like, you can't just say that and we're gonna run with it.
Right.
We're gonna have to back it up with some data.
Having this big title, did you feel, I don't know, pressed to have to sway one way or another? Because listen, during that time, obviously, you being from New York, in New York, there's always been that discussion of the bias of only New York artists getting the kind of...
Oh yeah,
the
we dealt with that all the time.
Right? And then obviously the South, it's undeniable. The South, it almost was like, you guys have to cover it,
Yes.
right? But, we also lived on the West Coast, and, we've heard it forever, was that there was always a bias
Right.
for New York
Right.
to get all the media outlets, the publication.
Right.
How did you feel about that? Is
That
it
was a big
true?
deal. Yeah. It was a big deal. We primarily sold most of our magazines in the Northeast region. So, and that opened up the door for magazines like Ozone. Remember when Julia
Oh,
Beverly came
yeah.
out for Ozone? It really was an East Coast based magazine.
Yeah.
And there was that whole thing about like, you guys aren't covering. That's why when you think back to the classic Source Awards where Andre 3000 gets up there and says the South got something to say.
Right.
That was at the Source Awards, right? Because there was that was true. That was what was really going on. When I took the position, the South was dominating, no question. So we had to respond to that. We had to say, okay, Nelly dropping an album, he got to go on the cover, right? It didn't always, and not in his case. I think Nelly's covers did fairly well,
Right.
but it didn't always translate into sales of the magazine. And I think that we used to look at it from that lens, like as a business, like, well, what's going to do well? But one of the things that I'm always comfortable with is when I don't know something. Like if you hear me talking about something, 9 times out of 10,
Right.
I sound like the guy that does the social media. What's the name? Ray? Be like, 9 times out of 10. So most of the time, I know what I'm talking about if I'm talking about it, because
Right.
I'm very careful about that.
Right.
I don't argue points if I don't know. And so I'm comfortable saying what I don't know. And as an expert in hip hop, right? When hip hop gets too big, you have to concede on the fact that you just can't know like these
Right.
days, like all these music journalists, stop it. You don't listen to everything. It's too much going on.
Right. It's a
I'm
lot.
supposed to curse. So I hired people that knew about Southern hip hop.
Right.
I tapped into I made sure I had a Southern correspondent. I made sure I had a Midwest correspondent. I made sure I had, West Coast correspondent, because everyone knows that's not my strength. Like, I was New York hip hop, but I wanted to make sure it was balanced and we were covering a culture that was continuing to grow. I mean, but we also did things like we had like Source International, Source France, like hip hop was growing so fast at that time, and we had to make sure that we were covering everything. So I was cool with being like, I don't know what's really happening in Atlanta. Like, I remember I did a lot of Ludacris covers. I feel like I did more than one Ludacris cover back then. And I remember going down there and having to be put on. Like Shaka being like, I have to take you to the club so you see what's
Right.
happening here. Like, you got to see when these records come on. I can remember that and being able to be like, I don't really know this
Right.
culture like that.
And there's no internet, right?
There's no
Mindful at this
internet
point,
back then.
There's no,
No.
right? Because someone listening is like, well, you could just hop online and look. No, it's not. You are the internet at that time, as far
And-
as you're holding the information, you're sharing the
Yeah.
information. So unless you're on the ground in these areas, you can't be in every
Right.
single place at the same time.
And we took our jobs seriously. Like, if I was going to talk about it, I wanted to feel an experience. I wasn't just going to write about it if I wasn't there.
Right.
I remember when, and I talk about this story a lot because it's such a big thing in the culture. But I remember when Ray sent me down to do the BMF story. He was like, you got to do it. And you got to go down there. And what am I doing in the middle of a BMF photo shoot? But that's what I did. Like, I was like, if I'm going to write this story, and this was before anybody was writing about them.
Right.
I have to go down there and meet them and talk to them and see what this is. So, we took that seriously at the source.
Any confrontations that you think of to this very day and you're just like, wow, that was tough, only because they wanted to be on a cover or they felt there was a bias, and now you look back and you're like, it was tough, but we can laugh at it now because it's 2023, but at that time it was intense.
I remember. Yeah. I don't like to name names. I got yelled at in a club once. I'll never forget that. Yes.
In the club?
See, I was in
with
the club.
the music loud?
I was in the club.
outside.
I was in the club. And people used to like to point me out to people, right? They'd be like, that's the girl that wrote such and such. And because of my own pride back then, I'd be like, And it happened a couple times where I was like confronted in a club about, I ain't like what you said. And I was like, what am I? I'm a girl. But I always felt that way also. Like, if a guy was confronting a girl, I'm a little old fashioned in that respect. I'm like, you doing too much. So there were a few.
You said it. You talked about it in your book.
I don't remember which one.
You mentioned.
Don't say no names.
Okay, you mentioned
don't say
a
no
few.
names.
But
because
I don't
I'm
think
so
it was-
cool
I
now.
don't think they were intense. I don't think they were.
Not
For
really.
you to
but
mention it that way, it
listen,
seemed like
I was having a conversation yesterday with someone about something, and we were talking about another journalist getting smacked, like a woman. And, of course, I would never say that. I wasn't there. I didn't see that. And those type of stories, and there's stories out there. So I did have confrontation with people, but no one ever touched me.
Right.
I was gonna say, were you ever worried though? Because
I'm
you guys
still
would have
worried.
your
I've
reviews.
seen
Still worried?
I've seen people put hands on people in situations where they shouldn't have, even in television.
Still worried about things that have gone on your issues,
I've seen it.
right? Like
I've seen it as recent as 4 years ago.
Oh man.
And you're
Witnessed it.
and this is removed.
watching it.
Right.
Like, I'm watching things like that. And so I
Time
take it
just-
very seriously
Of
now.
course. Yeah.
Right? So back then, when it happened, maybe I didn't think it would ever get to that level because I knew there was always someone like not too far.
Sure.
Right? I was never by myself. These days I'm by myself sometimes. So I'm like, you by yourself. You better keep it moving.
You still
you better
think
keep it
people, though,
moving.
in 2023?
Oh, I know it. I know it. I
Wow.
know it. There's some men in this game that are disrespectful.
Do you?
And people don't know. And they get on these platforms and they're talking on these platforms
Right.
and they're saying things, but they're cowards. Because I've watched them do things.
Do you think people don't know, or they're just
People don't
ignoring
know.
it because they're
People
real?
don't know. People don't know.
Do you think that you have at all, because of everything that you've been through and the things that you know, and that you're unapologetic with your reviews and your decisions, and were you worried that you were going to get blackballed at all?
I think so. I think when I filed my lawsuit, I was
Right.
concerned with that. And
Did it
listen,
happen?
It kind of happened for a little while. Who was going to hire me from after I'm filing a lawsuit? But then Rhonda Cowan did. And I went to BET 6 years, and I transitioned into television, and it's been great. I have never looked back, and it was a great time to transition into digital, right? So I was fortunate, and I think everything happens for a reason. But I definitely feel like I felt that way. I see people do it to other people in the game. Like, I see things happening, so I know it still happens. You have to have really thick skin.
Well, how have you had, I don't know, you have thick skin?
I mean, you know how I've had. Look at everything you've been through.
Absolutely.
Like,
but learning from
you know?
it's you shouldn't have to have that thick skin. But the reality is, you have to in order to maneuver and navigate this world.
Yeah.
Where did you find your source of strength when you know people are keeping you out, you're being isolated, blackballed, or we know how the game is.
Yeah, I'm too vocal to. Sometimes I'm like, they'll never hire you. They're like, she don't. You know, I'm just me.
Yeah.
I just say what it is. I've always been like that. But people in positions of power, they don't like that.
Absolutely not. Which is
So
why
I'm like, you better figure it out and work for yourself.
it's the best thing you can do.
Yeah.
Favorite cover that you've ever done?
That I did?
Yeah, that you did.
The Rockefeller cover.
Why was that so special for you?
Because it was Jay-Z hadn't done a cover of the Source magazine in a long time, and there were some issues, and even stuff was traveling on the internet recently about that, like Jay and the Source. And I was able to get that cover, and it did really well. So I love that cover. I love the Kanye cover because it was the first. I love the Foxy Brown cover. I wasn't the editor-in-chief, but I wrote that cover story on her.
She was wearing turquoise in that photo shoot, right? Wasn't it? And it had like a more islandy feel.
Yes, on the log.
I remember going to Barnes and Noble to pick this up and read it because I
that
love Fox Boogie Brown. Okay,
She
very
loves
much.
that cover. Shout out to her. She loves that cover.
Does she? Oh my gosh, she makes me so
loves
happy.
that cover. Yes, and she looked beautiful on the cover.
Absolutely.
So it was a big deal even for me at the time. I don't even think I was working there. I might have just been writing for the magazine.
Wow.
So, you know, she wouldn't just talk to anyone. She's still like that to this day, you know? So she gave me that exclusive.
Are you guys still working on her memoir?
Good question. Yes.
I'm
In due time.
in due. Kim,
People will
I have
ask
been
me all
waiting
the
on this
time.
for a
I'm like,
long time.
I can't speak on it. Fox got to speak on it. You know, that's hers. That's her story. She has to be the one to talk about when it's coming.
Yeah.
And any detail, it has to come from her. So
It has to be hard though. I mean,
people ask me all the time.
yeah,
I'm
well,
like,
because listen, when it got first announced, I was like, oh, me and Katrina, 'cause Katrina knows I love Fox.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I need to read it, but I also
oh, and it's
and at the same time, I'm like, is she going to be fully transparent in it? Because listen, we hear things, but we don't know, and only she can speak on it, right?
It's her story.
But
Yeah.
I'll
It's
say
her
this.
story,
I'll say this in sticking by me to write it.
right?
Because she knows what I represent, of course she's going to be transparent. She
Yeah.
knows, you know, like, and that's an interesting,
That's hard.
that story,
yeah,
that's like one of the best hip hop stories.
I
Like
need
that
it.
story and what she's been through in her life, in her career, and even being so quiet now. I don't think people are asking the right questions. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I hope to continue to work with her on it and it, you know, come out when she's ready.
Yeah.
But it's being worked on.
Do you ever get protective? Because obviously it's someone you care for, but you know, it could be Fox, it could be anybody
Yes.
that you have a close relationship with, and you
Yes.
see things being said about them, and you're just like, oh, I'm ready. I'm ready. And what do you do to either stop yourself or maybe times you do go in? What is that voice telling you?
See, now it's different, right? I had to be careful at a certain point in my career as a journalist to remain, you know, to not have any bias, right? I'm protective of her, absolutely.
Right.
And so, yeah, now I'm comfortable, right? People that know, they know. I'm very protective of Kanye, right? I think that he's been a champion of mine throughout my career as well. So, and you know, and these are like giants in the culture that have stories, like really intense stories, and then the career and the music to back it up. So there are those people. I think a lot of the relationships that I have now with people that I work with now, I'm cool with. I'm going to be biased, right? So if you bring it up in a conversation, I'm gonna be like, don't do it, because I'm gonna go, right?
Right.
Like I'm okay with being biased now because I'm not reporting on the culture
Right.
every 5 minutes, right? Like I know these people, and if I say that I know certain people and I work with certain people, like I really know those people, and it's different now than it was, I think, when I was at the source. So I couldn't say, like I felt a way if I like knew someone. I
know.
can't talk about it. I can't say that I'm cool with them like that because then people are gonna, question my credibility, and I don't care about that anymore.
Right.
I'm like, oh no, don't say nothing about that.
Right.
Would that be hard for you? Like a review, an album came, you guys would do the microphones, right? Mm-hmm. Or any article. Would it be hard for you if you had a personal relationship with an artist and it came on your plate like, hey, we got to do this story? Like, is that something like, oh, I'm not gonna write it?
I think it was hard for me back then. And I didn't write it. If I felt a way. I think it's so funny that you talked about Foxy because I did 2 of her stories when I was at the source. And you weren't supposed to do that back then, right? Like everyone was like, oh, we need another writer. We have to have a different perspective on this next story. I did too. No one ever asked me any questions about it, right? Like they never said, well, maybe they're too cool. You know what I'm saying? Like it's the first time I rode in a Bentley. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
It was with Fox.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
But I think your credibility was already built at that point.
Well, my credibility was built, but it was also, I think it's a double standard. I feel like when there were men that I was cool with or men that people were like saying rumors about, she might have been involved with this person. That's when it came into question. And it was like,
oh,
why?
Now
it's
it's
just
an
like
issue.
everything else, right? So that, when I look back on it, is interesting because with certain people, I was very careful as to say, okay, you can't write this story. So, let me have this person write it. When it came to the mics, right? It was a mic committee.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not like there like handing out the mics, like 1 mic for you, 2 mics for you.
3, 4.
You know what I'm saying? Like there was a committee that it had to come through, and then it would go up. Right? There was a process that we used. We had little voting sheets on the mic. Like you couldn't just give I vote for mics on the
Right.
Nas album. Like it didn't work like that. Like there was a piece of paper you had to fill out. And you would circle the mic, and then you would put Y, and then you put the tracks you like, and then you had to justify it.
There's a criteria.
There was a criteria in the source
Equation. Were there any that you were like, oh man, we should have gave that one 5?
When I went back to the source, the staff was younger than me. I was kind of coming back in a different role. Even though I was doing the job of editor-in-chief, it was more of a leadership role for the team. And Kendrick comes out, and they were like, 5 mics. They were all excited. And I was like, I don't know. And I hadn't even really fully immersed myself in it. I was just like, I don't know about this, right? I was like, I don't think this is going to fly for a 5 mic album. It was like maybe, he probably got like 4.89 or something. And these days when I look back, I'm like, oh yeah, they were right. They were right. He's like my favorite MC right now.
Wow.
Absolutely.
What are your recent 5 mic albums? Like, what would you in your head be like, oh, that's a 5 mic album right there?
I mean, his last album, Miss Morale. I'm like, again, I don't even do this, but I thought it was phenomenal. I had a couple of debates with some of my music friends, my music expert friends. I'm like, I thought it was like beyond 5 mics. Just me. I thought like his growth was incredible. I'm just a huge, huge Kendrick fan now, right? Not that I wasn't back then. I thought he was dope, but I think just watching him over the span of I don't know, the last decade and how he's grown as an artist, as a lyricist, I just am very impressed with him in hip hop. Very impressed. So I'm like, that's it right there. Like, that's the hip hop that I remember and that I want to champion. So I think that was like the last thing I heard that I was impressed by.
You really like.
I'm a tough critic.
I don't think people
Yes.
realize.
Yeah, I'm a tough hip hop critic.
2001 to 2005 was such a time
It was.
in hip hop.
It was.
There was Jay Nas.
Yeah.
There was 50
And their
Ja.
battle. And their battle and beefs. Like that time.
All of those beefs, 50 and
Yeah.
Nas, M and the Source.
M and
And
the
you're
Source.
in the midst of
You're
all
in the
this.
midst.
Yeah. I was a casualty of war in that beef.
Yeah.
Eminem and Benzino
Right.
thing. I was a casualty of war. They were just dragging my name through the mud like they could do that. Yeah.
And then, like, how would you deal with that though?
Yeah.
Like, keep going, put your head up high, and just keep going. Like,
Yeah, like having tough skin, right? Like when Marshall, I don't know him like that, just funny. When he put my name in a record, and people to this day, like they'll mention it. If you know, right? And they'll like mention, we'll joke around about it. I'm like, that boy don't know me. But that was such a big deal at the time. It was like, Eminem dissed you. I'm like, first of all, he shouldn't be dissing a girl. Okay. But it was a big deal at the time. It was the biggest rapper out. And it was disrespectful, but it wasn't very clever. You know what I'm saying? So I think that for me, just kind of being in the midst of that, it was hard to kind of maintain who I was. I was trying to be professional, right? Because I still have the Bronx in me. So I could still be, somebody told me recently, shout out, that I have the most lethal mouth that they'd ever come across in terms of like what I say or what I can say. And I was like, really? You know, and I took it as a compliment. I was like,
I think, yeah. But you choose not to. And you know,
right. So like
choose-
it's the words and the thinking and that sort of thing. Like that had to be held back in a position like that at the source, right? Like I couldn't come out and diss him back when he did that.
But it
Right, I
had
had to
nothing to do with you. For people who are watching, you really
No.
are just in proximity of the situation because
Yes.
obviously Dave, Mays, and Benzino, they're going through their issue, and because they're,
Yes.
co-owners of the source. You're the editor-in-chief, so you're a casualty in
catching
their
strays.
situation.
I was, but I was an investigative journalist at the core, my heart. So when tapes came and that happened, I was like, I gotta find out if this is real. I gotta go get the story. And I went and got it. So, and I believe that happened after they threw me in the mix, but I was discovering and uncovering the real story, and I stand by it to this day. If you go back and do your homework and pull it up, which they'll never do, they'll figure out all these ways, right? To like flag the content or somehow, like, like there's like a lot of, they have, people in those type of positions of power can really control the industry by the things that they can do because they have access and money. They have such a big machine behind them that they just press a button, go, and they'll like, all of a sudden, my Instagram, you'll never see me come up on your feed again. Right? You'll be like, what happened to Kim? No, they shut me up, right? Like that's the power of a lot of these major players in the game with a lot of money, right? And I think that back then, that was also something that happened. But I was just doing my job.
Right.
If you go and read the story, everything is fact checked. There's quotes in there. Everything is true. Everything that I wrote in that story, I stand behind to this day. Sorry. I mean,
beef or no beef, you would have told the story.
Yeah, like, and I guess that was beef back then because that's what they call exposing you. I think I ended that story with something like, you decide. But, these are the facts. I'm giving you the facts. And now you guys decide what you think. I'm not calling anyone racist. I'm not saying that. I'm saying this is what it was.
When you put in, you're doing your research and you have stories like this, do you feel people back away from you in the industry?
Yeah, totally.
Really?
Yeah.
Other artists, they'll just kind of avoid the conversation with you. And have there been people that
a lot of people are very clout chasing. I didn't mean to cut your question off. Go ahead.
Yeah, because I didn't know if it's one of those things where people come to your support and say, wow, this is a crazy story, whatever it is. Or are they like, Kim is out here and she's rocking the boat. I'm just going to step away and distance myself because I don't want to catch strays in the situation. Like, how did people react to you when you are doing your job as a journalist and just researching information?
There was definitely people that supported me And I think that, and not just that, covering that story,
Sure.
but other things, right? Those people, to this day, I feel like those are the truth tellers. And then, so you have that community in hip hop, and then you have, you know, people that they're looking for clout, they want to be famous, they want to be next to, you know, certain people. So they're very careful with how they move. But there's that spirit that a lot of us, I think, in hip hop have about, especially in the media game is crazy right now. So especially in that space, right?
How is it crazy from your perspective right now? Because it seems like everybody who has a platform or anything, you just order a mic on Amazon and, hey, I'm going to record myself and now I'm a journalist. There's, you know, and to each their own. I get the hustle. It's always hard for me, or like Katrina, you know, I've been in broadcasting for 18 years. We understand the ramifications. If we say something without citing it, or just, hey, I might destroy somebody's life, but hey, it is what it is, without any type of proof. Now, how do you feel about media when you say, you know, it's obviously a crazy time? How is it, in your opinion, a crazy time? Because I kind of just try to be above the fray of the chaos, the noise.
I think with technology moving so fast, faster than we're able to keep up with, that there are too many voices and there are too many platforms, and everyone has the power, right? And that power is dictated by not your credentials, but by the amount of followers that you have. And we see that you can get a ton of followers by doing certain things, right? So there's a formula to success on social media. And if you follow that formula, you will amass a community. And now you have, if you have a certain amount of followers, now you have a viable platform. But you're pushing information that isn't fact checked, that is, you know, you're pushing a lot of false, I see a lot of false narratives just easily pushed. And I watched media pick it up, and I'm like, no one even checked that. No one made a phone call.
And they run with the lie, and it's around the world by the time you even try to correct it. It's done.
Just
Nobody
make
cares
a
about the truth.
Phone call.
Right.
If someone says they got a $60 million deal from Hulu, just call Hulu.
Right. Right.
And see if you get a quote from an executive up there, or see how they respond.
Right.
Right? No one's doing that. They're just saying, such and such got a $60 million deal from Hulu. Hey, you heard such and such got $6 million from Hulu? I'm like, yeah, I heard it, but I read the article and no one at the network said that.
Right.
So why do you believe it? And that's the question we need to ask ourselves. Why are we so easily deceived by people just who have a platform, using that platform to their advantage?
Why do you think that is? Is it just laziness on doing research, or is it just clickbait? Is it the news cycle is moving so fast? Is it just a combination of all the above?
Yeah, I feel like it's a combination.
Yeah.
I feel like it's just, you know, everyone has something to say.
Yeah.
Nobody likes to listen anymore.
Right.
People just want to talk.
Right.
Everyone.
Right.
It's like, I call the podcast space, I call it men therapy.
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh,
when I watch podcasts in hip hop,
right.
it's mostly men. And they're very long.
Yeah.
They're very long. These top, if you look at who's nominated and who's at the top hip hop podcast of today, it's like 3-hour episodes.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
what are y'all talking about for this long?
Right.
This is therapy for these men with trauma in hip hop. I'm not saying that us as women, we don't have it too. We do, right? We talk about it, but it's just, right now it's like overpowering in the hip hop space to me. And maybe it's because of the people I follow. A lot of these, you know,
It's the
people are my
algorithm, what you're
friends.
seeing.
Yeah. But I'm scrolling. I'm like, he's telling a story for 4 hours. Now he's telling a story for 4 hours. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Like, no one's going to therapy?
Right.
So
It
you're
is-
just,
apparently it's therapy.
it's men therapy.
Right. Yeah.
That's what it is. They should all just change their name on their podcast to male therapy.
Right.
Because it's just like this unleashing of men emotions.
Right.
And we get accused as women of being emotional and making emotional decisions. I've said this before.
Right.
But as I watch in the space and media, I just see men just like pouring out their hearts to each other.
Was it like this during the golden era, but we just didn't see it? Do you get what I mean? Like we see it more now because of technology. Do you think this also existed then, or not really?
No. It didn't. They didn't talk as much. Talking now is a talent, right?
Right.
Talking's the new rap. Talking's a talent. So now everybody wants to talk, right? I got a podcast. And people get up there and they just are, kind of running with their own stories. And you're just like talking. And I feel like it's a hustle.
Right. For
right?
sure.
Podcasting is the new hustle.
Do you like it?
I do. I love it. I told you in the beginning. Remember, I was like, I kind of love it.
Yeah.
But I like to critique it. I like to study it and watch, right? So I see what interests me. Like, what am I? I'm definitely always into hip hop. Love hip hop. So I consume a lot of content in the hip hop space. It's interesting to just watch these days, right? Because there's just so much content. We're like beat in our heads with content.
Oh yeah.
Like
I mean that's
content abuse.
It's part of the scrolling, right?
It's the
more
scrolling.
Feed. It's like you're not doing anything. You'll grab your phone. You don't even realize that you're just scrolling and being entertained, and you're kind of zombied out. You're not really focusing, but that is entertainment.
It is. I make sure to look at when your phone tells you spent 1 hour
screen time.
Yes.
I make sure to pay attention to that because I'm like, I was on my phone too long today. Let me chill out and kind of take in what's going on in the real world because it's not real.
Right.
But
did you feel like that when you were at the Source and during that time period when you were out most of the time, right? You're out every night. You're at the clubs. You're at the places.
I was out every night.
You were out here.
Right.
Do you feel it's kind of the same thing, except now people are just doing it from their couches?
It's not the same thing.
Why?
It's not. Because I feel like this, this sort of thing is very, it's not authentic, right?
Right.
It's
There's
not
no human interaction.
Right. It's like if you and I sitting here today, it's much different than me DMing you like, oh my God, you look so cute in that photo.
Right.
Right?
Right.
But me coming here saying, Nessa, you look amazing. Yeah. You look great. How do you, like, your
Way
feeling
better.
is
I love
different.
it. Yeah.
You believe me.
Yeah, for sure.
But if I DM you, you might be like, whatever.
Like,
even scroll.
you
might, depending on your
tap.
relationship with the person, it's a bit
Right.
different. It's like the heart eye emoji.
Right.
It's being abused. You're all abusing the heart eye emoji.
There should be a
right?
limit.
So like, you put up a cute picture, then you get a heart eye emoji from people, right? They're just sending it to you like heart eyes,
Right.
heart eyes, heart eyes. Ooh, you look so cute, right? It's easy to just kind of do that, right? It's like formulaic. But is it authentic? Do you really care enough about me to, you know what I'm saying? Like call me and make me feel better? Like, no, it's all like right there. Scroll. Heart eye, heart eye.
Have you always had this though, where you want a deeper connection with people?
Yes. Right? And it's not that I can't have surface level transactional relationships in the game. It's easy. But I don't buy into them, right? And I don't trust them. I think that, again, like personal interaction is so important. And I think that was the difference of how we approach what we did back then before this time. Because there were people that came to me after I wrote things about them and like questioned it. And if it wasn't confrontational, like in a club, right?
Right.
If it wasn't that, I was fine with that. Like, yeah, let's talk about it. Like, why didn't you like this record? I would tell you. Why did you guys write this negative review? Let's talk about it. Like, it's okay. And that was like nurturing relationships. And there were people who were really looking for feedback back then because it was, if the Source told you, you weren't good enough, then you wanted to be better. Right. So I had to have those conversations with people where they questioned some of the things that we put in print about them. And those were real conversations. And I came into them respectfully. Like, you know, I didn't want to take anything away from someone who might have been trying to build a career.
Right.
Or, you know, it was constructive, but it was real. You had to sit face to face with someone and actually be like, yeah, I wrote
Own
that.
up to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was it competition between you and other media outlets then? I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay. So, but you worked with Elliot a
Yeah.
month before you went to the source,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Elliot was one of the people that gave me like my first assignments. So I had a relationship with Elliot. He gave me a job at XXL. I was there for a month and then I left because I wanted to go to the source.
Well,
you know,
I mean, it's a big
I wanted
opportunity.
to go to the source. Yeah, I wanted to go to the source. Sorry.
And then you left.
Yeah.
So were you also in competition with radio, Hot 97 at the time? And how was the dynamic in media?
It was different. I don't think that I was in competition with
Okay.
with the radio stations,
It was
right?
just publications more so?
It was more so publications because, you know, we were in different lanes. And so we also supported each other. Back then, I mean, we wanted to go to Summer Jam.
Right, right. Mm-hmm.
So,
Got tickets backstage at Summer
you know what I'm
Jam.
saying? We would be like, let's do an article on Hot 97.
Yeah.
Summer Jam's coming. So I think that we all kind of, you know, relied on each other for certain things. That's just the nature of the business and the relationships that we had. But the competition really came with us when it came to like the source, it was really about the magazines. And, you know, even when hip hop went digital, it was different because the source tried to get into that lane at that time. And it was a big, I think, money hole, I remember. They always talk about that, the business of the source and how they poured a lot of money into
The
the
.com.
online back then. And it didn't work because it was just a little bit too early, right?
Can you imagine if the timing was right?
Yeah.
Just the being on the forefront and really having that vision of it going digital.
Yeah.
How are things now with you and Dave and Benzino? I mean, obviously the lawsuit happened. I know you had mentioned that you and Benzino seem to be in a good place. How are things now in general after the lawsuit?
We're good. I stood up for myself and I would do it again if I had to. I went through it, but we created history at that magazine. And the Source story is a great story. The story of the Source is a good one. Nobody else has that. I will say the brands out here, no one has that. What we had is pretty incredible.
Right.
All of us that came through that magazine, nobody else has that. Right. You know, no disrespect. XXL don't got that. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Source is
they
different.
Those, you know what I'm saying? You didn't graduate from there and become, let me be more positive. I'm not coming, but the Source has an amazing legacy
Yes.
and history.
It's true.
Stories, right? And so for me, that is more important now. I did what I did. I do it again, but it's over and done with. So, I mean, Ray and I, you know, we had a heart-to-heart years ago, right? And we were good. And that's how he's really always been. He's always been pretty blatant. If you read my book, right? He's always been pretty blatant about how he feels. So I think that was the easiest relationship to mend because it was like, I did what I did. You feel this way. I feel this way. Okay. What are we mad about, right?
We agree to disagree.
Right. And in his own words, he'll be like, I ain't have to pay her. So he's not mad. He said that. I've heard him say that before. I ain't have to pay her. Sort of in looking back, because he did give me that job, right? He will say, like, I'm the one that put her in that position. That's true. That is true.
Really?
Oh, that's true. If you read the book straight from the source, that's true. He's the one that decided that. He's the one that came to me and said, you're about to be the editor-in-chief. Yeah, he gave me that job.
I thought it was a collective, everybody wanted you. No?
There was a whole petition about why I shouldn't get the job or something like that. I think I
Really?
talk about that in the book. Yeah. A lot of people on the staff thought it should have went to Eric Parker. And look, Eric had, you know, he had his stripes too. It was just what it was back then. Like, he was kind of next in line. And I knew I was going to get the job because Benzino was running the source, and he told me. He was like, no, you getting the job. But whatever his reasons were,
Right.
that was, and I was qualified, and I'll stand by that. Now, looking back, some people say, do you think you were too young to have that job back then? Yeah, but a lot of people who took that job were young, right? Like, we were all very young.
Everybody's young at this
time. Like I said, like, there's some stories that can be told from there. So I feel like for us, right, it really should be about, and I said, you know, shout out to Ray, because I said recently, Ray out here keeping the source alive. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's
right.
not even, you know, shout out to Londell as well, because he's kept that brand going all this time. But I mean, in the space of talking, right? And we're in this narrative space. He's the one that's visible,
Right.
right? Like, I'm working in TV.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't see the writers or people who work there as visible as we were back then.
That's a good point.
They're not out there anymore.
Good point.
Right? Because we see who the gatekeepers, to
Right.
your point,
Yeah.
are of the culture these days.
There's two moments that I want to ask about that happened during your tenure
Okay.
that I'm just so curious what it was like in the office on these 2 days.
Okay.
The first day was when Aaliyah died. She was August 01. Do
Same
you
to-
recall what that day was like when she passed away? With Source being what it was then, people looking to you guys for their news consumption. I mean, I can just imagine what a day like that would have been.
I remember getting a phone call about Aaliyah. And at the time, a very good friend of mine was really close with Timbaland. And he called her and he told her. And this was before the news broke. Again, remember the access?
Right.
Remember I was talking about knowing stuff before?
Knowing before everybody else.
Oh, I
knows.
knew, right? So, like, she called me. She was like, Kim. And I'm like, what? And then she told me, I was like, oh, my God, right? So, like, I remember the feeling, the shock of it, that I remember that moment. That's what I associated. Just hearing about it beforehand and then watching it play out and watching it break. You know, and again, we were not leaders in the digital space back
Right.
then, right? I'm trying to think if all hip hop was doing the alerts at that time.
One.
I
don't
think
know.
they might have been, right? So I would often get wind of something before I got an all hip hop alert. Remember they were doing the daily alerts, the news?
Yep.
They were ahead of the time with that, right? You'd get them on your SkyTel. And I would get the story before I saw the alert.
Oh.
A lot. But we didn't have anywhere to put it. We, you know, it was going to take us a month before we put that story out.
Right.
So it was a lot of meetings and talking about how we were going to cover things and being responsible for that. I was in that position when Jam Master Jay was killed.
Oh, man.
I remember we did the cover, so I remember that. Also when ODB passed,
Right.
I remember that. Right, so there were significant moments of us being in the office, getting the news, and being like, "Oh my God!" Like, and then having like an emergency meeting, changing the direction of the magazine and the tone of the magazine at that time. September 11th, we went to work the next day, but I wasn't the editor in chief then. I was working under Carlito, and I remember he sent everyone home. He was like, "Everyone just go home," because the city was. It just felt so dreary at the time. I was getting on the Brooklyn Bridge, getting ready to go to the source when that happened. And like the cops stopped me right in front and wouldn't let me get on the bridge. And I'm like, oh my God, what is this traffic? Making everyone turn around. So I like missed the bridge by like this much, thank God. But, you know, I remember the feeling of, I mean, if you're from New York, then you remember the feeling of that time. So I definitely remember the feeling of that time. But in the magazine, it was crazy.
And you guys went to work the next day?
We went to work the next day, and everyone was like, what do we do? I mean, I think, didn't Jay drop his album on that day?
Same day. Yeah, and Fab too.
We were like, Jay and Fab, we were like, do we really care right now? You know what I'm saying? Like, it was like we were building up to those releases, but we had to stop. Everyone has to stop. It was real life. Those were sad times. The blackout was a lot better. I remember the blackout
Right.
when I was at the source. Those are better stories. That's why I say the source can be a movie, right?
Easily.
Those are better stories. Like, I left that night, came back to my office, and I was like, what happened in my office last night? That's exactly what happened. There was stuff in my office. People were like, don't sit on the couch. I'm like, what are you talking about? Because I was able to get my car out, but I remember the blackout. But yeah, we had a lot of good times.
Just being in that moment. I always try to put myself in that moment and what it was like, is because I don't think people realize just how much of the culture you helped shape and shift in that time period.
Right, it was a special time, yeah.
It was a special time.
I mean, there's so, as we celebrate Hip Hop 50, there's so many people that built this culture.
Right.
And shaped the culture. So I look forward to more celebrations of that, right? Rather than just like, let's do another concert with the same artist. I mean, look,
We love that too.
I do.
However, we need more.
I do. Right. But like more.
But that's why it's important to hear from you, because you lived it, you experienced it, and you are a great storyteller. And without that, you're welcome. But without you and other people in your position, we're not going to know, right? Like, we're just not going to. There was no internet at that time. There's no archive of what was happening. So these stories are really important to share and to preserve. Because it's important, right?
When
I'm hearing this, I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. We were kids, like, hearing about this, but to really comprehend you being in the thick of things,
it was fun.
having conversations, hearing your name in songs, like, huh?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Were you ever worried, like, okay, this artist is about to come out, there's a good chance I might be on the album by name?
No.
Really?
Like that they would reference me?
Yeah. It could be it doesn't have to be in like a salacious way. It could just be like,
right, because y'all better not say nothing salacious.
like, it could just be like,
I'm cool, I'm good with my words.
Like, oh.
And I'm going to say something you ain't going to like. I don't think so. I feel I own most of what I do.
yeah.
So everybody got a skeleton or two. So I'm very comfortable with, like,
Sure.
If it's fact, right? Now, if you're saying things, I did worry that people would say things that wasn't true, right?
But that did happen.
Yes. Things were said that wasn't true. And I was like, why are you out there lying? So I feel like there were times where I may have worried about that. I'm like, I don't really recall, but yeah, I might have been like, oh, I hope, this person doesn't do that or that, especially being in that position. But no, there were definitely things that I heard and I was like, This is like a little half a subliminal or something.
Right.
And I'm like, who are you talking to? You're not talking. Like, I think about that.
You're like, wait a
because I'm
minute.
like a decoder, right? So I, when I listen to music, I like to decode the lyrics.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Are they talking about me?
Yeah,
Did the covers that you did they have subliminal cryptic messages on them? This has been like an ongoing theory that I know Katrina and I talked about.
There'd be like questions and be like, okay, that's a sub.
Is that real with intention?
Yes.
From your end, or the artist was like, I want this to be part of it?
Both.
Right.
Both. There were definitely little subliminal things in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to put myself in a lot of the stories that I would write. So if you really knew me and you read it, you'd be like, oh, okay, you could. Because, the whole thing with us back then was we were taught to write a certain way. Mm-hmm. I'm different now. If I write, everything is personal. But we were taught to take yourself out of the story. Mm-hmm. Right? You can't tell a story in the first person. Don't do that. Not in the source, right? You're not part of the story. Put your little byline in the end. And that's it. Make it really small. Nowadays, we're in the era of you tell your story and you own your story and people are out there and it's, you're a part of it. You make yourself a part of the story. And I think there are benefits to that, right? Just knowing who these storytellers are. But back then, you couldn't do that. So I used to sprinkle things so that I could go back and
Be like,
remember.
boom, boom.
Remember that time.
Like, and there were a lot of cover lines had double meanings. I used to love doing that. Because people rarely caught it.
I was gonna say, did people catch on?
And when people caught it, I used to love it. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, I see how you did that," you know. And you know, we were petty too.
Right.
We were petty.
Right.
Like in that whole 50 and Ja thing, we were petty. We were doing petty things, and you not blatantly, but if you really looked at it, you could see it and you could tell, right? Or like if there were stories that were written and we wouldn't put a byline on it, right? We'd put a fake byline. There were fake bylines in the source sometimes.
And why?
So,
Why?
because maybe the tone of the piece would be negative, right? It was like a negative tone, or you're like, you know, we're doing this story because of this. So nobody, especially back then when we took pride in our journalism, right? If we had to do something like that, we were like, nah, I'm not putting my name on that.
Ooh.
But we would be creative with the names. So if you really knew, you could figure out who it was, because I'm going to throw this little subliminal in the byline, and you'll know. But the world won't know, but you're going to know it was me.
Right.
'Cause I want you to know it was me.
Oh, man.
So we were petty. We were, there's a little petty stuff in there.
Few questions left.
Okay.
If there's a moment you could relive over and over because it brings you so much joy, what would that moment be in your life?
In my life,
Yes.
I want to say had my kids, like when they were little, right? Of course. Because I look at them now, I'm like, I know. You getting on my nerves. Like, did I really give birth to you? And then I will go back to the photos of how precious and cute they were. Your baby's how old?
1.
My God. They don't bother you. They're quiet. They're so cute. And you do everything.
Yeah.
And you go like, oh. I would probably go back to like that. If you call my phone, sometimes you'll get my voicemail, which is Kiana at maybe 4 or 5. I don't even know. She's so little. And people go, oh my God, your daughter is so cute. I'm like, she's 16 now and she's not like that at all. And I still have that voicemail. So those things, like those precious times, I would go back with my kids. Because that, you know, that's just a motherly thing, right? Like mothers are going to say that.
Yeah.
You have it's like you're going to blink.
Yeah.
Your baby's going to be asking you for money.
Right.
My
broke
son
best
calls
friend.
me every day when he gets out of school. It's like 3:01, and he calls me. He's like, "Mom, can you send me money?"
Oh my goodness.
And
you send it.
And I yell.
Yes, you send it.
I yell, and I'm like, stop calling me like this every day. And then I'm like sending him the money.
Oh, man.
Like,
What is an insecurity that you worked really hard to overcome?
I snapped on the male podcasters and said that this is like therapy too.
Uh-oh.
Yes, no, you're good. We need more of this as women. Like,
Yes.
let us get out there. An insecurity.
That you worked hard to overcome.
Besides my weight, does that count?
It counts.
Oh
if that's
my
something
God.
that you feel.
Probably, yes, my weight. I've been struggling with that all my life, right? And we all have, us women, we have that struggle.
I mean, I know for myself.
but let me tell you
Katrina,
guys something. If
hard.
you don't eat, you won't gain weight. So
or it
now
could be hormonal. You could even stop
no.
eating and you still
That's
can't
bad.
lose the weight.
That's a bad message. I'm joking. Yeah, no, it's learning, like, you know, that's I'm working on that every day,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like, you got to work out, you got to go to the gym, like, you just have to keep yourself healthy.
Oh, yeah.
So that's something that I work to overcome. I think all of us women work on that. Yeah.
A truth about yourself that you've tried to suppress, but now you embrace.
Does everyone get these hard questions?
Yeah. Is it hard? I feel like
Yeah.
these are gems
They're good.
for people.
They're good. You're like, yeah.
You know,
I wasn't prepared. Oh my God. Something that I've tried to suppress.
yeah. And you now realize I'm
That's
good
me.
with it.
Yeah.
Probably-
And it's empowered me.
No, don't say that, Kim. I was going to say my disrespectful mouth, right? Like, I'm like, but it's not always disrespectful. It's a warranted disrespect.
Right.
So I think probably I've tried to suppress my voice, right? I've tried to suppress my opinion. I work hard every day to control reacting to things. Like that's an exercise of mine. I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago, when I went through my divorce, which was really one of the toughest times in my life, I couldn't control myself.
It's hard. And it's part of survival, right? Reactionary.
So
It's part of survival. You got to react
I'm
to survive.
good. Like don't do this to me, please. I'm too old. But you could walk up to me now, right? And you could like go like this and like have a bunch of mouth. Like, not saying this happens. This doesn't happen. I don't have that much of an exciting life. But I could control myself and my reaction to it so much better than I was, 25 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So things that it's not important, right? So reacting to people or feeling like you have to say something back to someone, that is something that I could be in a meeting. Let me do a better example. I gave you the street example. I don't know why. I could be in a meeting and someone could be of an opinion in work that is completely not what I want, right? Yep. And I'm working on a show, let's say. And I can look at the situation and be like, it's not that important. They can have that, right? Like, I don't need to say something. I don't need to give them my opinion, or I can compromise. So I'm really good with, I'm still working on it. I'm still a work in progress. I think a lot of us who come from where we come from, we can't control ourselves and control our reaction to things. We always have to say something. We always have to respond.
It's a defense mechanism. Right. It's survival.
Yeah. Right.
That's just what it is.
It's who we are. And so what I've been practicing is how not to do that. So you can say things to me and I can be quiet. I've been practicing how to be quiet. And it's working sometimes. And when I go home and I'm like, you know what? It's good that you stay quiet, because it would have spiraled out of control. And for what?
For what?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Last question. Best piece of advice to Katrina and myself as working mamas, first time being mothers in, an industry that we have to work hard in, that we love, that we've committed so much of our adult life to. What would you tell us?
To be okay with yourself and the decisions you make that benefit your family and your children, and just be okay with having to take a step back from your career. That's my real advice, right? People are like, did she just tell them to step back from their career? Be okay with it if you have to do it.
Right. Be okay with your decisions.
Right. You can come back.
Sure.
And you're going to have to fight, and you're going to have to work harder to get back in. But sometimes as mothers, you have to step out. Right. And it doesn't mean you have to, don't quit your job.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Don't quit your job.
Right.
But you can't be everything for everyone.
Correct.
And you will be more comfortable with knowing that you were everything for your kids.
Yep.
Because the job will be there, right? But your kid's not always going to be 1 year old.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So
sweet baby.
Be okay with that and feel good about it. And it's fine.
That.
Yeah, it's
I love
fine.
that advice, because
you can't be in the club. Like, it's fine.
Hey, I might not make it to the club. You know what I've also realized, and tell me if you felt the same, I'm more focused and clear on what I want, right?
Yes.
If it's not my child, it is my career, because that's always been my baby. And everything else on the outside has just been, and I'm okay with that decision. I'm okay with saying, these are my priorities, and if you don't fit in this,
right,
I can't do it, because time is limited.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's when you realize the value of time is something you can never get back. It's the most important currency that we have, is time.
It is. And I think, as women, we kind of, a lot of times you hear the rewards of, right? Like, if you see, like, kudos to Cardi, right? She was pregnant. You saw it. She was working. She's been working,
Sure.
work. That's hard, right? And it's kudos to her. But it's okay if you don't do that.
Yeah.
It's okay if you want to be pregnant and sit at home because whatever your reasons are, right? I just want to just give me a second.
I love that space. I love the space to do what you want versus living up to the patriarchy of what I should be doing, or what I think I should do, or this, or my friends are going to judge me. Do what makes you happy.
Right. And don't let, I hate to just be like this, but oh well, I'm going to be who I am. Don't let a man in the business tell you how to move.
That's
and
right.
I think there's a lot of men who are out here like, you can't get pregnant, you can't take some time off. You got to make sure you get back in. Please stop.
Just support. If you can't support, then just stay out the way.
Right. Don't let, I had a lot of men when I was coming up kind of like, in a brotherly way, try to give me advice. And I think it messed with me because I was like, no, like, let me be me and let me make decisions as a woman that I'm comfortable and okay with. But, you have a lot of,
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you for paving the way.
Yes.
Thank you for being
This
an
was
amazing.
so much fun.
Good.
How did your lipstick stay on the whole
God, I put it
time?
on right before you came. That's the only reason. But thank you for everything that you've done. Thank you for the work that you're currently doing and that you want to do. And I just want you to have the flowers that you deserve.
Thank you.
And being unapologetic and speaking your mind, no matter what. Thank you for not allowing anybody to silence you. And, I can only imagine the hurdles that you've gone through, but thank you. And thank you for giving us the time today.
Yes.
Like, I don't take it for granted. I really believe time is the most important thing that we have in our life other than our kids. And I don't take it for granted that you sat here and had a conversation and shared your gems and your beautiful aura with us. Thank you.
Thank you guys, and thank you for having me.
Of course.
And keep doing what you're doing. There's too many men out here in this space.
Let's go. Please come by anytime.
I will, because it's so comfy.
Good.
Thank you.
And start a podcast.